In my 342 cycles as Senior Professor of Advanced Xenobiology at the Galactic Science Academy, I have never encountered such an absurd proposition, I declared, my crystalline appendages clicking against my desk in agitation. Accepting a human? A Deathworlder. Into our most prestigious program. Professor Xalax Brightwing, that's me, the most published xenobiologist in the Orion Arm, winner of the Grand Scientific Merit Award 6 times running, and now apparently the unwilling mentor to a species that still thinks throwing projectiles at problems is an acceptable solution. The application is quite impressive, muttered Dean Lyra Starweaver, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with uncertainty. This Olivia Chen graduated top of her class at Earth's Cambridge University. Cambridge, I scoffed, my fourth eye rolling independently of the others. A learning institution on a planet where they believed the sun revolved around them barely 500 years ago. The dean's patterns shifted to a stern magenta. Need I remind you, Professor, that our non-discrimination policy extends to all Class 5 sentient species? Yes, I waved a crystalline limb dismissively. But surely we can find some technical reason? Perhaps the atmospheric composition in our lecture halls would be unsuitable. She's already submitted engineering plans for a modified environmental suit. The gravity difference. Built-in compensators. The psychological strain of being surrounded by superior life forms. The dean's patterns flashed warning red. Professor Brightwing. Fine, I slumped back in my hover chair, watching it adjust to my shifting crystalline mass. But when this experiment fails spectacularly, I want it noted in the official record that I opposed it from the start. Word spread through the academy faster than a quantum entanglement cascade. By the next solar rotation, every faculty member knew about the human student joining the advanced xenobiology program. The betting pool, naturally, started immediately after. 2 weeks before mental breakdown wagered Professor Quantum Flux from theoretical physics, depositing his credits. 10 days until she misidentifies a basic protein chain offered Dr. Aurora Wavelength from biochemistry. Please, I chimed in, adding my own substantial wager. She won't last past the first cellular reconstruction practical. These humans can barely reconstruct their own primitive technologies, let alone manipulate living matter at a quantum level. The day Olivia Chen arrived, half the faculty found excuses to be in the reception area. She walked in wearing what looked like a sleek, silver environment suit, but moved with surprising grace for a species evolved under crushing gravity. The suit's transparent faceplate revealed a face that, while alien, displayed what I recognized from my xenobiological studies as a confident expression. Professor Brightwing, her voice came through the suit's translator with remarkable clarity. I'm Olivia Chen. Thank you for accepting me into your program. I noticed she'd modified her suit's manipulator fields to produce a passable approximation of our traditional greeting gesture, a complex crystalline refraction pattern. Impressive, but party tricks wouldn't help her survive the rigors of advanced xenobiology. Yes, well, I responded, my own crystals deliberately producing a minimal acknowledgement pattern. I trust you've reviewed the safety protocols? We can't have any incidents. She nodded. That strange human gesture they use instead of proper photonic communication. Absolutely. I've memorized all 843 pages, including the appendices on emergency quantum state restoration. Several of my colleagues' bioluminescent patterns flickered with surprise. Even I had to admit, grudgingly, that memorizing the entire safety protocol was more than most new students managed. We'll see, I said, my tone carrying the weight of 3 centuries of academic skepticism. Your first assignment will be tomorrow. Don't be late. As she walked away, I caught several of my colleagues adjusting their betting pool entries. One even tried to reduce their wager on immediate catastrophic failure. I maintained my original bet. After all, how long could a mere human last in the most challenging xenobiology program in the galaxy? The answer, as it turned out, would shake my crystalline structure to its very core. The first sign that my carefully calculated bet might be in danger came during the molecular reconstruction practical. I designed the test to be particularly challenging, reconstruct a Zentarian flame lily from its base components while keeping its defensive plasma discharge intact. Impossible, declared Nexus Brightscale, my most promising Arcturian student. The ionic balance would destabilize before cellular cohesion could be achieved. Precisely why it's an excellent test, I hummed, my crystals resonating with satisfaction. The other students, representing 12 of the most advanced species in the galaxy, buzzed, flickered, and pulsed their agreement. Then Olivia Chen spoke up. What if we approach it like a lightning strike? Like a what, I asked, certain my translator had malfunctioned. On Earth, lightning strikes create plasma channels through the atmosphere. Living organisms have evolved to survive similar electrical phenomena. If we apply that principle to the flame lily's reconstruction. I watched, all four eyes widened, as she proceeded to reconstruct the flower using a method that could only be described as barbarically elegant. The resulting specimen wasn't just functional, it was perfect. Beginner's luck, I muttered to myself. But it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, Olivia tackled every challenge with what she called Earth logic. The term made me cringe every time she used it. During our study of quantum entangled organisms, while my other students approached the problem with sophisticated mathematical models, Olivia compared the process to something called square dancing. See, if you think of each particle pair as dance partners, she explained to her bewildered classmates, they're always connected, always moving in relation to each other. The quantum state is just like the dance pattern. This is advanced xenobiology, I protested, not some primitive ritualistic movement. Yet her explanation helped 3 struggling students grasp the concept immediately. The betting pool began to shift. Mental breakdown by midterm changed to top marks in practical applications. I refused to adjust my wager, but I did start assigning increasingly difficult projects. Psychic fungal networks? She compared them to something called social media and mapped their communication patterns in hours. Multidimensional tissue regeneration? She referenced Earth creatures called starfish and salamanders, developing a new regeneration theory that had the Department of Medical Sciences requesting copies of her work. Perhaps, suggested Dean Starweaver during a faculty meeting, we should consider the possibility that human perspectives offer unique insights into biological systems. Unique, I scoffed, my crystalline structure vibrating with indignation. Their planet still has organisms that reproduce by physically combining genetic material. And yet the dean's patterns pulsed with amusement. Miss Chen's latest paper on symbiotic relationships is being published in the Galactic scientific journal. I needed something bigger, something unprecedented, something that would finally prove humans weren't ready for advanced xenobiology. That's when I remembered the Krixian Paradox. 300 years ago, the Krixian species vanished overnight. They left behind perfectly preserved biological samples showing a species at its evolutionary peak, yet they had somehow devolved into non-sentient organisms within a single generation. Every attempt to understand the mechanism had failed. Your next assignment, I announced to the class, my crystals gleaming with anticipation, is to propose a solution to the Krixian Paradox. You have 2 weeks. The room erupted in protests. The Krixian Paradox? Even the High Council of Evolutionary Sciences couldn't solve it. 2 weeks? The last research team spent 10 years on it. This is impossible. Only Olivia remained quiet, her environmental suit's readings showing increased heart rate and something humans call adrenaline. When she finally spoke, her words sent ripples of shock through the class. Professor Brightwing, could I access the original Krixian biological samples? Access the... Those are priceless specimens. They're kept in quantum stasis at the Galactic archive. Yes, she agreed, but all our theories are based on studying copies of copies. I'd like to see the originals. Her request was so audacious, so completely unexpected, that I actually found myself submitting the access forms. After all, when she failed, I wanted there to be no possible excuse. To my surprise, the Galactic Archive approved her request. As I watched her don specialized containment gear and enter the quantum stasis chamber, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and unease. Just remember, I called after her, some puzzles are beyond even the most innovative approaches. She turned back, and through her faceplate, I saw what humans call a smile. You know, Professor, she said, sometimes the hardest puzzles have the simplest solutions. We just need to look at them from the right angle. As the stasis chamber sealed behind her, I found myself wondering if I should have placed a different bet in that faculty pool after all. News of a human accessing the sacred Krixian samples spread through the academy faster than a quantum cascade. Soon, my laboratory was flooded with uninvited observers. Professor Quantum Flux abandoned his precious temporal equations to hover near our research space. Dr. Aurora Wavelength practically moved in, her bioluminescence patterns shifting between fascination and skepticism as she watched Olivia work. What exactly is she doing? Aurora asked, observing Olivia organize the samples in what appeared to be a completely random pattern. Making a mess of priceless specimens, I grumbled, though privately, I had to admit there was something methodical about the chaos. Olivia had created what she called a timeline wall in the lab. Physical samples, holographic data, and historical records covered every surface. She'd even requested Earth biological records, which currently floated in a holographic display next to the Krixian genetic sequences. "Look at this," she said one day, pointing to a particular genetic marker. "This sequence. It reminds me of something we see in Earth coral reefs." Coral reefs, I let my crystalline structure flash with derision. The Krixians were a Type 3 civilization. They weren't some primitive aquatic colony. "But that's just it," she continued, frustratingly unperturbed by my dismissal. "Coral can revert to a more primitive state when stressed. They call it polyp bailout. The entire colony disaggregates into individual polyps as a survival mechanism." Before I could properly express my outrage at comparing an advanced species to simple marine organisms, Professor Quantum Flux's gravity manipulators whirred to life as he moved closer to the displays. Fascinating. The quantum signature in this genetic sequence does show a pattern similar to coordinated biological disaggregation. That's when the trouble really started. Professor Moondancer from the Department of Evolutionary Studies barged into my office the next day, his plasma form practically boiling with indignation. "Have you lost your crystalline mind, Brightwing? Letting a Deathworlder handle our most important evolutionary samples. And now I hear she's comparing them to primitive Earth organisms." "I assure you," I began, but he cut me off with a burst of plasma. "The board of directors is concerned. Your reputation for academic excellence is being questioned. Some are suggesting you've gone soft, lowering standards to accommodate a human student." My crystalline structure vibrated with barely contained fury. "I have not lowered any standards. If anything, I've made this program more challenging since she arrived." "Then explain why she's still here. No student in the history of the Academy has ever been allowed such access to restricted materials. If she damages those samples..." "She won't," I heard myself say, surprising both of us with my certainty. Later that day, I found Olivia still in the lab, her environmental suit showing signs of prolonged use. "Professor," she said without looking up, "have you ever wondered why the Krixians left such perfect samples? Almost like they knew someone would need to study them." I paused. In 300 years of research, I hadn't considered that. "And look at this," she continued, pulling up 2 holographic sequences. "The genetic degradation isn't random. It's organized, almost like a programmed response," I finished, my scientific curiosity temporarily overwhelming my prejudice. She nodded excitedly. "Exactly. And these markers here? They're not just similar to coral polyp bailout. They match patterns we see in human stem cells, Centaurian morphollaxis, and even your own species' crystalline regeneration." I felt my structure resonate with an unfamiliar frequency. Was it possible? Had we been so focused on the complexity of the Krixian civilization that we'd missed something fundamentally simple? The next morning, I received a formal complaint from the Board of Advanced Sciences. They demanded an immediate review of my teaching methods and questioned the validity of allowing a human to continue in the program. As I read the complaint, I heard excited voices from the lab. Running in with as much dignity as a crystalline being can manage, I found Olivia surrounded by hovering displays, her hands moving through the holographic data like a conductor leading some primitive Earth orchestra. "Professor," her voice cracked with excitement, "I think I found it. The Krixians didn't evolve. They evolved, but not in the way we thought. They. An emergency alert cut her off. The board of directors demanded my immediate presence. "We'll finish this discussion later," I said, trying to sound stern despite my burning curiosity. "Don't touch anything until I return." "But Professor, this changes everything. The samples, the timing, the genetic markers. It's all connected." As I hurried to face my academic peers, I realized something that shook me to my core. For the first time in my long career, I wasn't rushing to defend my reputation or the Academy standards. I was hurrying because I genuinely wanted to know what a human had discovered about one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries. Perhaps, I thought as my crystals hummed with anticipation, it was time to reconsider my position in the faculty betting pool. The grand lecture hall of the Galactic Science Academy buzzed with an energy I hadn't felt since the discovery of quantum consciousness. Every seat was filled crystalline beings, plasma forms, energy matrices, and even a delegation from the High Council of Evolutionary Sciences, all gathered to watch a human either make history or become a cautionary tale about Deathworlder hubris. "This is highly irregular," muttered Director Plasma Storm, his form crackling with skepticism. "A student presenting a solution to the Krixian Paradox, without peer review." I stood at the podium, my crystalline structure carefully maintained in its most formal configuration. "Distinguished colleagues, I present Olivia Chen, whose research into the Krixian samples has yielded unexpected insights." Olivia walked to the center stage, her environmental suit gleaming under the quantum lights. She began without preamble, in that direct way humans have that still makes me cringe slightly. "The Krixian Paradox isn't a paradox at all," she announced. "We've been looking at it backwards. The Krixians didn't devolve, they transcended. Through biology." The hall erupted in dismissive murmurs. Director Plasma Storm's form sparked dangerously. Transcended? Through primitive biological means? Preposterous. The Krixians were masters of quantum engineering. "Exactly," Olivia said, projecting a complex genetic sequence. "Look at this pattern. Everyone assumed it was degradation, but it's actually similar to how a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly." "Are you comparing one of the most advanced civilizations in galactic history to an Earth insect?" The director's plasma form nearly doubled in size with indignation. "Not comparing," modeling Olivia continued, unfazed. "On Earth, metamorphosis isn't regression. It's a complete reorganization of biological systems to achieve a more advanced form." She pulled up multiple displays, showing the Krixian samples alongside Earth examples: butterflies, frogs, and sea creatures called nudibranchs. "The Krixians left us their cellular blueprint," she explained, highlighting specific genetic markers. "These aren't signs of devolution. They're instructions. A technological metamorphosis encoded in their very cells." Professor Quantum Flux floated forward. "But the energy requirements for such a transformation were solved by the Krixians centuries ago," Olivia finished. "Remember their quantum fusion breakthroughs? They weren't just powering cities, they were preparing their entire species for transformation." She brought up a new display, combining the Krixian genetic sequences with their energy distribution patterns. The resulting hologram showed a breathtaking cascade of cellular reconstruction. "They encoded their entire civilization into their genetic structure," she said softly. "Not to devolve, but to evolve into pure energy beings." The hall fell silent. Even Director Plasma Storm's crackling ceased. Here she pointed to a particular sequence. "This pattern matches how human stem cells can become any type of cell. And this, similar to how your crystalline forms," she nodded to me, "can reconfigure at a molecular level." My structure resonated with understanding. Of course, we'd been so focused on the complexity of Krixian technology that we'd missed the elegant simplicity of biological solutions. "The final proof," Olivia continued, "was in the original samples themselves. They're not just preserved specimens, they're instruction manuals. The Krixians left them deliberately, knowing that eventually someone would understand." "But why take such a risk?" demanded an elder from the High Council. "Why not simply document their transformation?" Because Olivia smiled behind her faceplate. They knew that only a civilization capable of understanding both advanced quantum mechanics and basic biological principles could truly comprehend what they'd achieved. She brought up one final display, a simulation of the Krixian transformation. The hologram showed beings of pure energy emerging from their physical forms, ascending to a higher plane of existence. They didn't vanish, she concluded. They evolved, and they left us the blueprint, hoping we'd eventually be ready to understand it. The hall remained silent for precisely 3.4 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Professor Quantum Flux's gravity manipulators failed, leaving him bobbing near the ceiling as he shouted questions about energy conversion rates. Dr. Aurora Wavelength's bioluminescence went into overdrive, creating a light show that nearly overloaded the hall's sensors. Director Plasma Storm, in a display that would be talked about for years, actually split into two plasma forms from sheer excitement before forcibly recombining. As the academic board huddled together, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of light, sound, and quantum fluctuations, I looked at my human student. She stood calmly, answering questions with that strange Earth confidence that I now realized wasn't hubris at all. It was the security of someone who had found genuine truth. "Well, Professor Brightwing," she asked during a brief lull, "what do you think? Did I pass the assignment?" For the first time in my long academic career, I let my crystalline structure display completely unprofessional colors of amazement and pride. "Pass," I said. "My dear, you've just rewritten xenobiology as we know it. One solar cycle after Olivia's presentation, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in 300 years, updating my teaching materials. The reason? Every single xenobiology textbook in the galaxy was being rewritten to include what was now being called the Chen principle of biological transcendence." "You missed a spot," Olivia said, pointing to a section of my crystalline lecture matrix. "The parallel between Krixian energy conversion and sea slug chloroplast absorption should go there." Yes, I grumbled, making the adjustment. Though I still think comparing advanced quantum species to Earth mollusks is somewhat undignified. Says the being who literally turns into crystal geometry. When stressed, she shot back with that human expression, a grin. The academy had changed. Where once my fellow professors had scoffed at primitive biological solutions, now they were frantically studying Earth's ecosystems. Professor Quantum Flux had taken to keeping something called a pet goldfish in his office, claiming it helped him understand particle transformation better. Dr. Aurora Wavelength started a whole new department, comparative primitive biology. The waiting list for enrollment stretched across 3 star systems. Even Director Plasma Storm, still slightly embarrassed about his public split, had started ending his lectures with Earth biology examples. Last week, he compared quantum entanglement to something called synchronized swimming. Professor Brightwing Dean Starweaver's voice chimed from my office communicator. "The Galactic Science Council is requesting your presence. Something about a nomination for the principal researcher position." I felt my structure vibrate with pride. "You mean my nomination?" "Actually," she said, her patterns flickering with amusement, "they want to interview Professor Chen. They're hoping she'll accept the position." My crystals briefly shifted to an undignified shade of surprise before I caught myself. "Well, good. As I've said all along, human perspective has its uses." "Speaking of human perspective," the dean continued, "we need to settle the faculty betting pool." Ah, yes, the betting pool. It had grown to truly ridiculous proportions, with side bets spawning their own sub-bets, like some sort of quantum probability tree. The dean called an emergency faculty meeting. Every professor who had placed a bet attended, their various forms creating a spectacular display of nervous energy. The final tally announced Dean Starweaver, her patterns gleaming with mischief. Not a single person correctly bet on Miss Chen solving the Krixian Paradox. Murmurs of agreement. Of course, no one had bet on that. However, she continued, there was one bet that technically wins on a technicality. The room hushed. Professor Brightwing's original bet stated, and I quote, "She won't last past the first cellular reconstruction practical." My crystals dimmed with embarrassment. And since Professor Chen has been offered the principal researcher position, she technically won't be lasting past that practical. As a student. The room erupted in a mixture of groans and crystalline laughter. "You can't be serious," I protested. "That's not what I meant." "Rules are rules," the dean said cheerfully. "You've won the entire pool." Later that day, as I sat in my office staring at my unexpected windfall, Olivia stopped by. "Heard about your win, Professor. Very clever of you, playing the long game." "Pure coincidence," I admitted. "Though perhaps there's a lesson here about unexpected outcomes and observation bias." "There usually is," she agreed. "By the way, I brought you something." She placed a small containment field on my desk. Inside was a tiny earth creature with multiple appendages. "It's called a starfish," she explained. "When it loses a limb, it can regenerate it. Sometimes the lost limb grows into a whole new starfish. Reminded me of your crystalline reproduction cycle." I found myself examining the creature with genuine curiosity. Fascinating. Though I do hope this doesn't mean you expect me to split into two professors. "Never," she laughed. "One Professor Brightwing is more than enough for any galaxy." As I watched her leave off to revolutionize another field of science, no doubt I realized something profound. Perhaps we advanced species had been a bit too quick to dismiss the primitive solutions evolution had crafted on death worlds like Earth. After all, any species that could look at a sea slug and see the key to solving the greatest biological mystery in the galaxy, well, perhaps they weren't so primitive after all.